I'm so excited, and I know you're supposed to say that when you come to talk, but I really am to talk about joy. I so walked in last night and just sensed a unique presence. And I just sensed some joy, and I just sensed a heart for God. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to be with you. I've been asked to talk a bit about, not one of the usual messages that I give, but to talk about what God taught me about joy. And I think most of you are going to leave here this morning with a perspective on joy that many of you have never had. Now, to do that, I have to give you a backstory and talk about myself a wee bit, which I don't like to do. But what God's allowed me to experience is what He used to teach me about joy. I grew up in a Christian home. I went to Sunday school 12 years, didn't miss a Sunday. And every year we had perfect attendance. We got a pin, a bar, okay? And so I had 12 bars. And you know that song, you know, we're Christians by our pins, by our pins? Yeah. So I would flip my shoulder and my pins would ripple, you know, a sign of deep spirituality. And so in addition to that perfect attendance, I memorized hundreds of Bible verses. And I went to college, and I had a full year of Bible undergraduate. I began to travel and speak, and then God gave me 5 years of seminary. I was first trained as a theologian, studied Greek and Hebrew and theological French, and then I went on to become a clinical psychologist. So most folks know me as a psychologist, but my heart is, my foundation is A, Christ follower, B, a Bible scholar, a theologian, and then I also do a lot of counseling. In all the work I did, I learned a lot about head knowledge. And I had a lot of head knowledge. And in the generation that I grew up in, knowing the right stuff and knowing good stuff and knowing the right view, for example, of prophecy. Is it pre, post, pan, poo, mid, or ah? Okay? And the right view of baptism. And the right view of all kinds of things. And I began to become so aware of how many groups and how many hundreds of denominations each believed they had the right view of everything. And if you didn't agree with their view, then you needed to go somewhere else. And somewhere, as I began to study the Word more, I realized that didn't seem to be the heart of our Lord Jesus Christ. And I'm not putting down head knowledge, okay? And then I had to, my senior year, for my MDiv, translate the entire book of Ephesians from Greek to English. And I came to Ephesians 3:19. Now, I love 3:20 and 21, okay? And exceedingly abundant beyond all we ask. Yeah, but Ephesians 3:19, Paul writes that you might know the love of Christ that surpasses knowledge. And I thought, wow, you know, that's just kind of the Bible being, you know, kind of creative. But I remember I asked my Greek prof, and then I went to Killer's Theological Dictionary, the Greek New Testament, and I looked up the word, and I found in that passage, actually, Paul uses two different words for joy. I'm sorry, for know. First of all, he says that you might know, epignosko, heart knowledge. Epignosko is knowing in a way that you may not be able to put into words. It's knowing in a way that impacts all of who you are. That you might know the love of Christ that surpasses knowledge. And nothing wrong with knowledge, but the scribes and Pharisees had knowledge. Many had the entire Pentateuch memorized. I mean, they were blowers and goers, they were big deals, and each different group had the right view of everything. And they killed the Messiah. Okay? So it's not just about more head knowledge and more stuff. And I wasn't taught a lot about how to cultivate heart knowledge. In fact, I was never taught that difference. To cultivate an intimate, growing love relationship with Christ. You know that hymn, Jesus, the lover of my soul? Some of you remember that who are old. That really didn't mean much. But as I began to understand that we might know the love of Christ that surpasses knowledge, having an intimate love relationship with Him. And I love spiritual pep rallies, but what happens during the week and in the morning and at night? My spending time with Him and not just doing more for Him became kind of a challenge. And so I began to be asked to, talk about joy a bit, and I was starting to learn about it. But then God trusted me with a dark 7 years of the soul. And that would kind of give you a brief foundation for what I wanted to share tonight. In 2005, and I'd already had cancer 4 times. In 2005, my dad had several extended hospitalizations, and he died. 2 months after my dad died, my wife of then 25 years was diagnosed with metastatic pancreatic cancer, given less than 3 months to live. God gave her a few more years. In 2006, I had my 5th cancer surgery, chemo, radiation. I lost my voice. I wrote a note where my voice come back, and the doctor said, well, there's a 50% chance it will, and 50% chance it won't. Well, it did come back by God's grace. In 2007, my middle son, Matt, died. 2 months later, my wife of then 27 years, Carrie, died. In 2008, my sister, Marcia, died. So in 4 years, I had buried 4 immediate family members. I finished burying my entire nuclear family, half my current family, and I had had 5 cancer surgeries. About a year and a half later, in May, I had my 7th cancer surgery. 80% of my tongue was removed, and they had to take muscle off my leg and put it in my mouth. Now, sometimes you have your foot in your mouth. I have my whole leg in my mouth. Okay? It's not that funny. And that's why I talk a bit funny, okay? And I was told I would never chew again. I would not be able to swallow, that I might have lost all of my salivary glands, my taste buds, that I would have a feeding tube the rest of my life. When the doctor told me that, I was laying in bed. I had something down my esophagus. I had 10 tubes going in my body. My jaw was swollen up twice as much. My mouth was sewn shut. And the doctor walks out. And it's like God saying, son, I promise to never leave you. I promise to never forsake you. And I can't not be faithful. God allowed me to be on the founding team of Promise Keepers. I spoke to over 1 million men in stadiums around the country. And, Promise Keepers. And I thought, boy, God, I served you my whole life. I've been faithful. In my early years, I'm MK from Taiwan, a third culture kid, and why? And God said, son, just trust me. Just trust me. I love you. I delight in blessing my people. Over time, I can do exceedingly abundantly beyond all you ask or think. Your circumstances don't limit my power and don't limit my will. And so I'm laying there, and I'd been on a ventilator for 2 days. I finally came through. The doctor says this. And then they said, you'll have to stay in Houston for a month and come to the hospital every day, because most of these surgeries don't work the first time. And this is kind of funny. On the way to stay at a friend's house who was a physician, I had my feeding tube, and I was in a car, and I noticed a Chick-fil-A. And so I pointed to my wife. I went, and she said, yeah, Chick-fil-A. And she said, yeah. I said, I said it in love, though, okay? That's very kind. And she said, you want to go to Chick-fil-A? Uh-huh. And she said, honey, you... Okay. She pulls in, what do you want? Okay, I'll get you Coke. So got a coat, parked the car. I took a straw. It took about 2 minutes, literally. I was able to get the straw to a corner of my mouth, and somehow I was able to inhale. And as soon as I inhaled, I broke out in tears. I was a mess. It was like I was hysterical. And she says, honey, what's wrong? And I looked at her, and I said, I went like that. And she said, can you taste it? Mm-hmm. Now, you might go in, well, Gary, why were you so pumped? Well, when you're told you don't have a taste again, a sip of Coke is a big deal. Little in perspective can be much. Does that make sense? Have you ever had a time in your life when God was kind of faithful in little, but actually it was a massive deal? And it made a profound difference for you? See, as evangelicals, we're not used to that. Bigger is better. More is better. Go big J, go big J, go big Jesus. And nothing wrong with that. But he who is faithful in little is faithful also in much. About 7 months later, my cancer came back. Went back to MD Anderson. They said they couldn't do a thing about it. I was less than 3 months to live. Go home and call hospice. And when the head of head and neck cancer at MD Anderson says they can do nothing, they can do nothing. But that was over 12 years ago. I've never experienced a longer or a darker winter. And many days, surviving was putting one foot in front of the next, having no idea what would happen. Again, here's somebody who's used to speaking to a stadium of 55,000 men. And now I can't even say my ABCs. But here's a cool deal. In the middle of that long winter, God gave me a gift. And God, in his love, invited me to do a deep dive into joy. And I made 3 wonderful discoveries. Number one, knowing what the Bible says about something and knowing how to apply it are 2 very different things. Boy, I could teach and preach and unpack and exegese what and have a pep rally, but really understand it and how to apply it. You see, information without application never produces transformation. Number 2, a primary objective in Christ's teaching was that you and I might experience joy. The words joy, joy, joyful are found over 200 times in the Bible. The verb rejoice is found over 200 times. In thy presence is fullness of joy. In thy right hand are pleasures evermore. Does that mean something or it doesn't? John 15, these things I've spoken to you, that you may be filled with my joy, not just dabbled in it a bit, but filled with my joy, and that your joy may overflow. John 16:20. A lot of you know that. Truly I say to you, you will have sorrow. And some of you right now are in seasons of sorrow and discouragement and loss and confusion. If this is a normal group, and after last night, I'm not sure it's normal, but if this is a normal group, we all have stuff. And the adversary is faithful. The adversary is reliable. He loves to distract and distort and discourage us. But your sorrow will be turned to joy. Whatever you ask of the Father, he will give it to you in my name. Ask and you will receive, that your joy may be made full. May the God of hope fill you with joy. Number 2, Christ was about joy. I was never really taught that. Number 3, excuse me. God's joy is different than the world's happiness. You see, joy is not a synonym for happy. Happy has its root in the word chance. So if by chance good things happen to us, we're happy. If by chance bad things happen to us, we're unhappy. But joy means that because of God's goodness and mercy and faithfulness, we can rejoice or give thanks, not for our situation, but in our situation. And that's why as I'm laying there in the bed with tubes all over and you'll never speak again and you can't swallow and you'll have no taste. And God said, son, nothing of any significance has changed. I love you. I've known you from before the foundation of the world. And this is a difficult time. But you've taught that I'm the way maker. Well, I am. I'm before you, and I'm alongside of you. Joy is not just a feeling of pleasure or happiness. Joy comes as a fruit of the Spirit. So I began to say, okay, God, so I'm going through all this, and I've had years of Greek and Hebrew, and now you want to teach me about joy. So what do you want me to learn? And God taught me 4 simple truths that I'm going to share with you. And these things are so simple, but they're practical. And I'll tell you, when you've had a lot of education, the more complex, going deeper means, and sharing all the views of pre, post, pan, pro, mid, and, but going deeper with him, you look at the teachings of Christ, it wasn't terribly complex, was it? So here are 4 simple things that God taught me. Number 1, choose to set your mind on things above. As a psychologist, research tells us that 80% of our thoughts are negative. And negativity clamors for our attention. We respond to negativity, doubts, fears, anxieties, the look in someone's eyes, their tone of voice, feeling criticized, minimized, hopeless, helpless. I spend over 30,000 hours literally face-to-face with people as a counselor. I'm old, I have gray hair, I have a gray ponytail. I've done this a long time. And time again, discouragement, depression, but the number 1 enemy is fear or anxiety. And Satan loves the what-ifs. Now, you may have not had this, but people in other churches do, okay? What if this happens? And what if that happens? And what if that happens? And you know what I found in my own life and from thousands of people? All the what-ifs are negative. All the what-ifs are negative. I've never had anyone say, Doc, what if God's faithful? What if he's not just a promise maker, but a promise keeper? What if he actually delights in blessing his people? I mean, isn't that unreal? And what if he, over time, wants to do exceedingly, abundantly, beyond all we ask or think? Oh, that's a nice verse. But is he serious? Yeah. Because he is the promise keeper. He does delight in blessing his people. The problem is sometimes he takes his time. But when he takes his time, that's a way of trusting you and me, okay? And giving us an opportunity to put our life where our mouth is, or put our life where our hands are, and actually live it. Set your mind on things above. I can't control the thoughts that enter my mind, but I can choose what I focus on. I can choose where I set my mind. And today, your mind is going to go places. You ever heard that verse, prone to wander? Lord, I feel it. Now, you may not have that problem, but if you slowly look at the person on your left, they have that problem. So you may not, but the person on your right, sometimes their minds can wander. So choose to set your mind on things above. 2 verses. Set your heart on things above, Colossians. Set your mind on things above, not on earthly things. Much easier said than done. Philippians 4:8. Finally, whatever is true, honorable, right, pure, lovely, admirable, let your mind dwell. And dwell does not mean I visit. Dwell means I move in with you. Let your mind dwell on those things. Number 1, choose to set your mind. Number 2, choose to count your blessings and be thankful. Yeah, even name them one by one. For example, when's the last time you thanked God for your home? I mean, it could be a nicer home, could be a bit bigger home. You drive by a nicer home, and boy, wouldn't it be nice if I lived there? For the food, all of you have had food. Walking, most of you walked in here. When's the last time you thanked God that you could walk? How about clothes? Thank goodness you're all wearing clothes. That would not be fun. But boy, I could have nicer clothes, and look at that outfit. And boy, I love those shoes. And boy, it's so easy that whatever we have, often enough is never enough. Boy. So we have our food, our clothes, sight, hearing. You know what? I never thanked God for my tongue. I mean, can you imagine? God, thank you for the mystery of Baba, and thank you for my tongue. How goofy is that? I didn't realize that our tongue and even saliva, the ability to swallow. I mean, I loved saliva growing up because with my friends we would have shooting contests to see who could shoot it the furthest, you know. Boy, saliva is part of our immune system. It helps us digest the food. I'd never thanked God for that. I'd never thanked God for my taste, okay? Never had I ever thanked God for my taste until that Chick-fil-A incident, and I could taste the Coke. Wow, God, you're so good. You see, it's easy to forget and dwell on the negative and not actually count our blessings. It's much easier to sin it, I found, than to do it. And counting our blessings never removes the problem. But what it does is it restores our hope, it renews our perspective, it refreshes our spirit. Am I making sense? Okay. Number 3, choose to claim God's promises. Oh, my. Choose to claim his promises. Over time, I discovered, and it's kind of embarrassing. I mean, memorizing hundreds of Bible verses, 12 years of perfect attendance, Bible college, good grades, 5 years of MDiv, TA, no. But to claim his promises, I realized that God's promises are more powerful than Satan's pessimism. Guys, we can believe our mood, and our mood is seductive. Or we can believe God. This might be helpful. Most of us are problem-focused. And problem-focused, when we focus on problems, the negative what-ifs, that leads to fear. And fear blinds us to hope. So let's just say this is a problem. It's actually a solution. But if I put it out here, that's not a big deal. But the more I focus on it, it becomes bigger than the whole middle area here. If I put it here, this is bigger than the entire congregation. If I walk to the edge of the Grand Canyon, which I've done, I would do it slowly, I can say that what I'm holding is bigger than the entire Grand Canyon, and it takes a stud to hold something bigger than the Grand Canyon. Now, if you think I'm serious, you know I'm more than a few bubbles off some. That something's wrong. You see how perspective changes everything? So when we focus on our problems, and boy, the adversary is so good at that, it blinds us to hope, and we become prisoners of our problems. We become slaves of our circumstances. The other option is to have a promise focus, to focus on his promises. And the promise focus leads to faith and gives us hope because we begin to see things through his eyes. We begin to see things through his perspectives. This week, the last 7 days, have any of you had any problems you found yourself focusing on? You found your mind going over and over again? Any fears? Any discouragements? Have any of you had any negative what-ifs? I have, okay? That's almost every time I talk. I don't have much saliva. I have a hard time saying words, and it took me about 5 months to begin to learn how to say my ABCs again. And I remember a good friend of mine, the late Norm Wright, called. And she said, well, Gary, when are we going to speak together again? I saw I'd never speak again. And I said, well, Norm, I can't understand myself sometimes. And how I don't think anybody will ever be able to understand me. And Norm had an amazing sense of humor, somewhat sick like mine. And he said, Gary, if God could speak through Balaam's donkey, then God can speak through you. And I died, I started laughing. If God could speak through a donkey, maybe, Gary, God can speak through you. And so many of us are aware of our limitations. Our limitations don't really matter. It's who we are because of whose we are, okay? And the Waymaker can't not go before us. He can't be with us. In fact, he inhabits us. Many of us have taught that, but I've worked with hundreds of leaders, some well-known pastors, who fell because they didn't really believe that. They didn't know how to practice that. Am I making sense? Okay. So, a promise focus. But seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and he will give you everything you need. Gosh, I hope that's true. Romans 8:28, we know that God can cause all things to work together for good. Not all things are good, but over time, he can cause all things to work together for good. He used my 8 cancers. He used my surgeries. He used my talking funny. He used my taking 5 months to begin to say my ABCs for good. So that's who he is. He can't not be faithful. And sometimes our stuff can last a long time. But our eternal Father will be faithful. And then Ephesians 3:20, again, now to him who is able to do exceedingly, abundantly, beyond all we ask or think. Now, either that's just kind of stuff, or it's true. And some of you this morning are in a situation where you might need to take that Ephesians passage seriously. If this is a normal group, some of you have some uncertainty, some of you have some fears. The promise keeper loves you, and he delights in blessing his people. And our job isn't to always have the answer or see how it will work out. Our job is simply to be faithful. Choose to set your mind on things above. We're almost done. Choose to count your blessings. Choose to claim God's promises. And choose to obey and act on what you know to be true. Or as Nike would say, just do it. But some of you have found out it's easier to tell it, to teach it, to preach it, to have a spiritual pep rally, go big J, to unpack than it is to actually do it. I began to be surprised as a young seminary grad to see guys who I admired, mostly men, some women, well-known, tons of followers, and that's been going on now for 40-plus years. Some with millions of followers, websites, sold millions of books. Brilliant at exegetically unpacking, and boy, they had knowledge, and boy, they could do stuff, but they didn't have this. They had a lot of gnosko, but not enough epignosko. And I'll tell you, this is where the heart, the mind stuff, the fear, the discouragement, the depression, the loneliness, the grief, and for those who are insecure, the narcissism. And narcissism has become a much bigger problem with many leaders today. It's hard when you have the correct view of everything, huh? And rather than the Sermon on the Mount, or rather than 1 Corinthians 13, love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. I began to realize for me that it was in some ways more important, not what I say about him, and I still write and speak, but how I love him, how I start my day, my awareness through the day. Yeah. Choose to obey and act. Again, Nike, just do it. Just do it. Minute by minute, day by day. I learned that sovereign joy is much more than a mood. As a psychologist, a mood invades us. We don't choose a mood, bad moods happen. Don't raise your hand. But do some of you in the morning ever wake up in a bad mood? Or after you've had your quiet time? And which I do every morning, pray on your way to work. Do you ever have a negative thought? Or do you ever sense some depression? Or do you ever hear what ifs? Negative what ifs? Do you ever have any fears that come? Boy, sometimes I do. And sovereign joy is always a choice. God, thank you that you are present, that you live in me, that you can't leave me, you can't forsake me, that you really do delight in blessing your people. And thank you that by your grace I am becoming conformed to the image of your Son. I'm becoming a man who lives and looks and listens and loves and sounds like him a wee bit more, every day. The victorious Christian life begins a life beyond moods. It's a life in which we choose sovereign joy, and we refuse to become the puppets of our problems and the slaves of our circumstances. And that's where so many folks are, my friends. And I have entire teachings just on some of this. Puppets of our problems, slaves of our circumstances. So now what? I'm wrapping up, okay? So now what? Here's a great quote by Henry Nouwen. People who have come to know the joy of God do not deny the darkness, but they choose not to live in it. And it's a choice, sometimes 50 times a day. They choose, excuse me, they choose not to live in it. They claim that the light that shines in the darkness can be trusted more than the darkness itself. Wow. And that a little bit of light can dispel a lot of darkness. They point each other to flashes of light here and there and remind each other that they reveal the hidden but very real presence of God. Part of my hope is that when we leave this amazing time together, that not only will we have joy and praise and things to thank God for, but through those who have taught you and what you shared with each other, we might have maybe a wee bit more awareness of his presence. That we might be encouraged to maybe listen a bit more and maybe be faithful in little. Choosing joy does not mean denying reality. It means embracing a bigger reality, putting the temporal in light of the eternal. Choosing joy means believing that our God is not just a promise maker, but a promise keeper. Choosing joy is making how I live as, if not more important, than what comes out of my mouth. It becomes a liver and a believer, and not just a teller of the word. So, I want to invite you to join me for the next 7 days, not the next month or year, next 7 days to choose sovereign joy. Simple, to practice these 4 simple steps I've shared with you. Regardless of your mood, you can always choose to set your mind on things above. I'll probably have to do that a couple times yet today. Pastor Stephen Cozy won't, but I will, okay? Choose to set my mind on things above, to count my blessings. As I was walking up, I said, God, thank you that somehow I can talk. I know I sound like an intoxicated Elmer Fudd sometimes. But God, thank you that you gave me the ability to at least communicate and share, to count your blessings, to claim God's promises. God, help us not just be tellers and teachers, but help us to be livers and examples. And then to obey and act on what you know, not just gnosko, but epignosko, heart knowledge, what you know to be true. Is it simple? Yeah. It's embarrassingly simple. Is it easy? No. No. Because the adversary is faithful. And the last thing he wants us to do is actually live it and practice it and be faithful in live it. In fact, my bias is he's much less concerned with what comes out of my mouth than what comes out of my life and my heart. That's just my perspective. So is it simple? Yep. Easy? Nope. It takes practice. Because we've got nothing to lose. Well, except we'll lose more discouragement, we'll lose more depression, and we might lose more anxiety. And guys, that's happened to me. Depression has run massively in my dad's side of the family. I still have depression, but nothing like I used to. I rarely have anxiety. It comes, but I've learned God's helped me rewire to take thoughts captive, to set my mind on things above. God, I don't know how this is going to work out, but I know you're faithful. I know you're here. You've known me and loved me before the foundation of the world. So I think like Peter, I'll get out of the boat. I'll get out of the boat, put my feet on what can feel like water, and know that if I fix my eyes on you, you can't not be faithful. You are the promise maker and the promise keeper. And God, help me proclaim you here, but may I proclaim you also here. That people may not just hear, but they may even hear with their hearts. Has this made any sense? I've shared about 7 years of stuff in about 35 minutes. But Pastor Chief said you guys are a especially gifted group, so it wouldn't be a problem for you. Would you bow your heads and close your eyes? John 15:11. These things I've spoken to you, that you may be filled with my joy, and that your joy may overflow. John 16, truly, I say to you, you'll have sorrows. You'll have setbacks. You'll have discouragement. But your sorrow over time can be turned into joy. Whatever you ask of the Father, he'll give it to you in my name. Ask. Ask, and you'll receive that your joy may be full. And in Romans 15, may the God of hope fill you with joy. My prayer is that, in part, to what God trusted me with, and what I've shared this morning, that maybe you might have a different view of joy than you had when you walked in. And maybe you might have a different view of knowledge, the value of head knowledge, but the transformational power of heart knowledge. And I want to close with this question. As I've shared with you this morning, what have you sensed God saying to you about you? What have you sensed God saying to you about you? You know, he really does delight in blessing his people. Those aren't just words. And he really is a promise keeper, not just a promise maker. And maybe one of the things he brought you here for is to help you hear his voice, feel his presence in some new ways. And I hope maybe you've heard him say, I love you. You're my beloved. You're precious to me. I'm here with you. And maybe begin to see challenging times and setbacks in his hands as actual sovereign growth opportunities. What have you heard God say to you about you? Take about a minute and just listen to him and chat with him.